Okay, let's get started. Hello, everyone, to this CakeFest 2021 and to this talk about IDEs and how to leverage the IDE specifically in CakePHP development to the maximum to be very productive. Yeah, quickly about me. So der Euromark is my handle, and I have been a developer at Spryker and tooling architect and automation specialist and all that stuff for quite some years, core developing 11 and more years. Yeah, and that is basically mostly happening in PHP and CakePHP. So today we are going to dive into CakePHP 4 and PHP Storm. 4.3 to be exact. So I'm already using the RCs, release candidates, to showcase also some of the newer stuff. And we're using PHP Storm because it is probably the most powerful IDE out there. There might be others that come close, but I think most people in the PHP world are using this IDE, especially in the corporate packages, to have all the functionality to be really quickly in developing. Specifically also looking into the IDE helper plugin, which we will show can really help here for the usability and to speed up things. Mainly also being able to generate annotations that are usable for PHP Stan and Psalm, but also they help local development, understanding the code when looking at it, when wanting to click on methods, what they're doing, to understand what the core does. Yeah, and autocomplete type painting will be a big topic here as well. So I already said by default, it comes with a very good support for CakePHP itself, for all the rapid development aspects of it. For some things, we need to, a few tricks, a few plugins to make it work. One of the JetBrains PHP Storm plugins that is really very highly recommended is the deep association completion. I will show that in a minute, what that means. But also, you might need extensions for PHP Stan, extensions for Cake itself, like the IDE helper, to generate here a few things. Most of these things I put into a wiki, and anyone is able to also submit further IDEs as well as specific settings and useful things. I will open that up in a minute as well. So to be very productive, first of all, the IDE needs to be tailored to you. So some of the default settings might not work for you. Some of the defaults are not really nicely to work with in CakePHP, for example. So I have a few things that also are in this wiki that I recommend quickly unchecking or checking, depending on what it is. So specifically about the fully qualified name in the doc blocks, so they're not messing up the actual use statements and don't affect each other. Documentation should not affect real code and the other way around. And settings, code style, we are using the short array declaration, for example. So some of these things are also taken care of the code sniffer afterwards, of course, so you can also do that. It's just faster if it already is done while you are in the IDE and you click and edit these files. If I go to this page, it shows you the support for the specific version of PHP Storm. It has all these tips here. It has the deep association plugin that I will show after this one. Some useful templates, some nice to have tips. Personally, I also adjust keyboards shortcuts because I want to be really fast in what I'm doing. So yeah, having to manually do things if there is a shortcut for something, that's definitely a no-go for me. Outdated stuff we don't need to talk about. In Cake 3, we had to do some more things that is now not necessary anymore. I can also just show now the plugin that I just mentioned, the deep association plugin. So when we go into the sandbox, which is my kind of go-to experimental tool, it's also online. So the sandbox has a lot of plugins pre-installed and showcases them. And we can go to, let's say, this index page. And if we just for fun create a HTML link, right, with a my title, and we do know the second option is a options array. Oh, actually, first the URL, some URL, doesn't matter. The third is the interesting one. And here we will see now that this plugin actually gives us the options that it kind of extracts from the method behind it. So it knows what kind of option keys are available, parses them, and provides them here. So we can easily see, there's escape title, which is sufficient if we just want to make a bold title. We don't need to do all the other de-escaping. So we can select that and false in that case, and so on. So this plugin is really useful, and maybe something similar exists for other IDEs as well. Maybe someone wants to write something like that. In general, here having the autocomplete is definitely worth it. Good. So now to the IDE Hub. I don't go into detail now how to install it. It's all written there. It's detailed. The main functionality that is very useful is when you bake code. And then when you manually modify that code afterwards further. So oftentimes you bake code with 4 fields and then you add later 2 fields manually via migrations. And then you just run the annotator and it will automatically update also the annotations in any file. We can definitely simulate that pretty quick. So we can go to let's see if the migrations are all done. Yes, they are. Cool. Then we can quickly write a migration file, which I also will showcase. I could just bake it now, but I'll just do it a little bit faster. Migration demo. And this migration demo will take the, what table do we have? Okay, we can also quickly find that out. We have a table languages. Okay, let's take the languages table. Fine. So we have a languages table, which I guess we have a language. Actually, we should take the users table. I think about it, because there we can see the fixture. So here's the fixture, and you, the entity, and you can see the entity has properties. It has methods that allow to use them. And if we add a new field now, let's say the user becomes a field supervisor. Doesn't really matter too much. Here you can also see the IDE helper provides this. How it works, I will show in a second. And it's just Boolean, so nothing too fancy. So that should be fine. So we add a supervisor Boolean field to this users table. If we check the status of the migrations, we can execute now this migration. And it should be done. Now, if we go into the database for users, it will show us the supervisor field back here. And now we can go into the annotating. I'll show you pretty quick how they look like in the command line. And we just annotate something specific, in that case, we can annotate the models. We don't need to do everything. And if we want to be really quick, we can filter by a specific name. So if we know it's about users, then we can just do that. And we'll, okay, I should have done verbose mode, but I think we can easily see that it did something by, yeah, it added a bool or null supervisor. The null, because it actually is nullable. We didn't put a null false in here. Yeah, we can do that if we want to. I can show you that as well. We just have to roll back the migration. Also take that change away. We revert this. So now we migrate again. That was not very useful because I didn't change it yet, did I? So roll back. And before we migrate, we're going to change this to false. So it's not nullable. It has to be either true or false. Then we're going to migrate, which also means that it is now a Boolean field. It's not nullable anymore. And when we execute it now, I'm not sure about the cache though. Should we do a clear cache? Clear or, yeah. Annotate models. So I should have really done the verbose mode. Yeah, you can see it actually did that, but I want to show the verbose mode pretty quick because it's definitely a bit, yeah, nicer to see. It also adds get supervisor or fail, by the way, which is a specific addition that I added to my entities. So if for any reason this field is not set, it would actually still return null. So it's like possible for entities to be partially set. And that can be if you select fields, only specific fields, and you forget this one field. So I personally like to use or fail wrappers around them, because here it will throw an exception if for some reason this field is not defined and not set in this entity. Yeah, so this is a specific trait that comes via the shim plugin, get trait, and it just provides these, let's say, more stricter wrappers around things. And yeah, to configure this plugin in order to fully work, you can go into your app namespace. There should be an IDE helper, yeah, and then we can set annotators for this. So one specific annotator here has been overwritten by the shim annotator, and it uses all the other annotators by default. You can add custom ones as well. And this will generate a lot of your necessary properties also for controllers. So if we go into an app controller, these ones can be generated in the components, like the, are there any components in here? Yeah, the page knitter component. If it would have any other components, it would also be added automatically on the top. The same for the helpers. We can see here this uses different other helpers, so those will be also part. Yeah, this HTML link. So if that is inside, it will automatically add this. If we remove this and we run the annotator with a quick filter on navigation, because we know it's about this. We see here, it added the property backend. So if you quickly just code something, you can, in the background, very quickly run these commands, and you have the autocomplete, which then makes it possible to link again, to provide these options. As we said, it knows the keys that are available and so on. And if you provide something wrong, so if you provide like true in there, it should usually say, this is not what I expect. Yeah, so everything should be like completely hintable and clickable to go to the core code and to also read what the description is about, maybe to read the code, to understand what's going on in detail. Yeah. Okay. That's great. Some functionalities that have been introduced in 4.3. I will go into in a second. Let me just quickly see where I am. Okay. So where's my slide? Oh, there's my slide. Okay. This is, I think for now, most of what I wanted to show about the annotations. What we also want to provide is what I already showed a bit, the autocomplete, and to have understanding of possible values. Also, we often use magic strings in CakePHP. You don't have to. You can use also fully qualified class names for many things. But the irony is that actually that can be slower because then you have to like search through a whole bunch of classes. With the magic strings together with autocomplete, you're actually faster even. And yeah, it can have its advantages. It also has its disadvantages, like the discoverability and stuff like that. But yeah, I'll show you how this works. We generate a meta file, and every IDE probably has some kind of style for how this meta file looks like. It's a pretty specific format. There is no standards on this yet. So in our case, I can show you the PHP Storm specific way of how this is done. The generator for this is called PHP Storm then. And you can see that there are also reusable pieces in there. So if you want to extend that and you want to write that for your own autocomplete, you can also do that. So this command, if you just run it like normally, it's up to date. Everything is fine. If we look into it, it has just the class names and at what index it specifies a specific value. So the argument sets for the user, if we want to look into it, I'll have to go downwards all the way here. So here we are. It knows that these are the fields. So if you try to do a get on any user, it will know that these fields exist. I can show you that. So for example, isDirty is a method that is annotatable. So if we go into any of our code, maybe we go into the overview controller and let's just do a new user, and user isDirty. And now, because of this, we have a list of fields available. So no more guessing, or if it's a long name to type it out, but you can just click and you have those fields available. And that works for all the things that you defined in these generator tasks. And there are tons of them that you can enable and you can further specify. In my case, I added 3 more. I added one for the service tasks. So I use service layers to use service functionality, also specific other libraries that I want to extend and I want to use or reuse. And for that, I have added one. I added a configure helper, and I added this one that I will, I guess, explain also in a second what this does. So yeah, we want to add a magic string autocomplete from the start to the end. We want to specifically look into all of these possible things that you right now have to type manually and that are taking a lot of time away. So something that came into 4.2 actually already was the, if I'm correct at least, I think so, is the URL from path and link from path elements. So if we go into a template, can we do the example index, which we just added this link. And if we actually want to use a real URL, right? What you usually did, and this is also a bit faster because it knows, based on our plugin that we installed, it knows the possible keys. So you can do controller, sandbox, plugin, and so on. Doesn't even register the plugin for some reason. Okay, but you can define the whole array here. You can use, of course, different strategies as well. One possibility is, however, to use the we just called it link from path. Link from path, and then the second argument is a path, and here you have now autocomplete, because the IDE helper task for the generation scans all your controllers and actions. So it sees all of your possible routes in a way. And those are just plugin controller action syntax. So you can use anything and click and you're done. So if you kind of know it's about superimposed, yeah, you can probably even super. Okay, superimposed partial lookups don't work. Maybe superimposed works. No. You have to know the plugin name. Interesting. All right, they can definitely work on the searching in the middle, but apart from that, you can also verify it afterwards. If you click on it, it should be in that list if it's really valid. So with this, you can create links even faster than so far. Other options are, as I've shown, the tables. You can use the tables, you can use the columns. So any of the columns that already exist are automated, of course. If you add a new column, it will not know it, obviously. It cannot know all the things, but if you just modify a column, you can change a column, then it would have the first one also auto-completed. The types are based on what types are available in your system, and so on and so on. If we want to show also the more complex usabilities, for example, in our application, we do have to register plugins. And some plugins are not easily named. And also here you have autocomplete, especially on the ones that have a bit more complex name. One example that I like to show here is this one. Because here the casing matters, right? It's not always easy to know exactly the casing. And if we wanted to work with this, it's rather easy to just require the plugin. We can do that in our sandbox. So we downloaded the plugin. We can load the plugin manually like this, or that already works as well, of course, or you can run the autocomplete generate, which should have added it now into the here. It added it into the add plugin possibilities. So when you do now this add plugin, you can even have it directly here. So if you need to add a specific order, then the add plugin, which adds it at the very beginning, or since for 3 at the very end, might be not sufficient enough. So you can autocomplete with this super fast as well. So that's useful when dealing with namespaces and these vendor prefixed plugin names, for example. They are not as trivial as many others here. Yeah. Anything else on that part? I think I already explained that all these methods are added automatically based on each cake version. So if a new cake version adds a new method and you run the annotator task, it will automatically add them. If you add new fields and you run the generator. It will make sure that you have autocomplete for new fields. So these are probably the most useful ones. There is also one more task, which is the illuminator. This one specifically is different than the others because so far it was only about code doc blocks and not changing existing code. This specific tool can also change existing code and in many cases add so-called class constants. So in order to avoid magic strings, to actually go into providing class constants for usage. If we run this on our code, it will, as we can see, add certain fields into our entities. Is that an entity? Yeah. So if we go into the supervisor, in the user entity, we can see now it also added the supervisor field automatically, and it just keeps them up to date to what the fields are available. That means in order to access this now, you have multiple options in your controller. You don't even have to use the fields like supervisor, but you can also, for example, use user field supervisor. The advantage of this is it will definitely tell you if it doesn't exist. If you have a non-existing field like foo, it's hard to say if that actually exists or not. If you call it foo bar, but it's hard to tell. There could also be a typo in there. Using the class constants, of course, will definitely make it clear if you have a typo or you remove that field, it will break. So that's very useful. And class constants in any usage you have, they also show you the find usages. So you can actually see what used this field. So if you refactor or you want to remove this, you can find out how much of your code is actually using it and will I break much or not. So class constants instead of the magic strings purely are usually more recommended if you have a high usability of those and reusability. In many cases, the simple magic string also can suffice already. So, and for our next slide. We want to quickly dive into the code itself and to see how we can actually use that in our everyday life. I provided a lot of autocomplete already and a lot of things, but there are probably a lot of like custom code and your own ideas of where it could also benefit you and speed up things. And one example I want to show you is I have something that I use to create icons with. So let's just make a p tag and format icon. So this one is, okay, 1 second. I need to remove this really quick and run the, so, okay. So this icon can provide font awesome icons or Bootstrap icons. And if we look into what exists, we can easily find out there is something like calendar. So by searching for it in the code, I can see, okay, cool, there's a calendar icon available, and I can call it my calendar. And if we go into the code, I think it's here. Yeah, here's the sandbox. I can see the calendar icon appearing here. So having to know all these names is quite cumbersome for like thousands of them, right? So having to know all of them is a bit annoying. And you don't have much autocomplete here. You just really need to either know or copy paste them out from other slides, or you have a documentation open and you can drag it in from there. What I added, I wrote a little format icon bootstrap task. So it just extends, it implements this task interface of the IDE helper. So here, this is the task interface. And you can select what kind of class, so I just put it as class constants here, what kind of class are we going to override? And I can pass a specific path to a file that I want to read. In my case, we want to read the, what's it called? Bootstrap icons JSON. So there is a Bootstrap icons JSON that ships along with the assets. So when you download via Webpack or whatever NPM you use, if you download them, you will have this nice little JSON file. Sometimes it's not a JSON file, sometimes it's a SVG file or some other things that are harder to parse. I'm lucky here because it's a JSON file, so that's super easy to parse all of these icons. And that's basically what I'm doing with this collect icons function. Based on this path that we configured, I'm trying to read the content. I'm passing the JSON. I'm only interested in the keys, not the specific icon code for this specific task. I'm sorting them alphabetically just so it's easier to browse through them. And then I return this array of icons. So the collections up here will just have the list. I'm going to stringify them. So for the PHP stan, you can use either this, or you can use the new approach with string. It's a string expressions, some string input anyways, and then it will automatically do that behind the scenes. But for now, we can also just use manual quoting. And the stringified list will go into this argument set that we've seen earlier, and then just assign to the icon method at the position 0. So whenever this icon is called and the position 0, the first one, is encountered, it knows this arguments list to be presented. Yeah, and if we now run this, we first have to install it, of course. So installing means adding it to the generator's task stack. And if we now run it, we will see that in here, it added these lists somewhere at the bottom. It's hard to see in the diff, but it's easier to just verify by going into our template. And now, when I'm opening this up, I have all these icons available. So I can use, if I kind of know what I'm looking for, so whoops, if I know it's about something like a reply, I can select either the normal reply all, or fill, So it's much easier, and it verifies if it really exists. And if you click on it, it needs to be in this list, otherwise it doesn't exist. And then we render it out, and it does show the icon. So this is a real use case of, maybe gives you some ideas of how you could write tasks to have the magic strings or certain autocomplete on specific methods further enhanced. If it's correlated, it would go into the IDE helper, which I have linked here. And if it's not correlated, it probably goes into your specific plugin, like we have for migrations, queue, service layer, stuff like that. In some cases, it can also go into my catch-all helper, IDE helper extra. And here is also what you just saw. So here are the tasks for the specific icons. And maybe, yeah, you have some good ideas that also can fit in here. And last, to sum it up, I want to quickly also say that the local development is not only about the IDE, of course, it's also about the whole stack around it. So the IDE should be configured to work flawlessly. I personally use the Devilbox. So what you've seen just now is an out-of-the-box tool that is really awesome for CakePHP development, because it ships with a whole stack of everything, and you can switch PHP versions really quickly. So all you have to do is you jump out of it, and you can Docker compose Docker compose down and up, and create very quickly and within seconds this different PHP version, and then log back in and go to your dedicated application, and you're back. So you don't have to use a local version, and you don't tie yourself to anything specifically on your local machine. For me, it works really like without much configuration directly out of the box. And it does have this nice little dashboard when you log in, localhost, where it shows that everything's running. You can see the databases that exist, and you can also directly go into the PHP admin and go into the database out of the box. So everything is basically set up. That together with the IDE setup, with Xdebug setup, so you can set breakpoints and stop at any point. These things are super valuable for a quick and local development. Yeah, that I think concludes this very quick session. And yeah, if any questions came up, I think this is the time I can answer some of them. For some,
if there's no
I couldn't hear you.
Oh, yeah, that was my fault. If there's no questions here right now, will you be available in Slack later on if they want to contact you? Okay. Yep. So you can contact him via Slack. There's a question in there right now. I don't know if you're in the Slack channel.
All right.
Did you see that question from?
No.
How do you explain PHP Storm far advanced against other IDEs?
Say again.
How do you explain PHP Storm, the far advance against other IDEs?
Well, it is backed by a lot of companies with a lot of money. So if you subscribe, it's very expensive compared to other IDEs. And given that backing of money, you have a lot of automatically a lot of more support. You have more developers that can be like put on the task. So it's like this cycle of actually even enhancing further, and it's hard for other IDEs, open source IDEs especially, to keep up with that financially backed situation, I think. So yeah, it is the de facto standard in a way now in the PHP world. In terms of VS Code, I have no clue. I've never used it. Find it out. Feel free to include that in the wiki. Any tips there? Things that are also possible to automate there? Absolutely. Yeah, and there are licenses for open source development. Exactly. I just can't have one because I'm working in a corporate environment. So that's off the table for me. But of course, if you're only doing open source development, I think then these licenses apply to you as well.